Hey, listeners, we all know how important it is to get dedicated face time with retail buyers. And now, when you upgrade to a RangeMe Pro subscription, you get 3 in-person buyer meetings at an ECRM session. That's right, 3 20-minute private meetings with buyers in your category. Tell them your story, sample your products, and have a distraction-free conversation. And a pro tip, our Startup CPG community discount is the best deal around on RangeMe. You can get RangeMe Pro with the 3 meetings for $11.99. That's more than half off the regular annual rate. RangeMe Pro subscribers also get unlimited product listings, a dedicated customer success manager, VIP access to limited time campaigns, exclusive ongoing submission opportunities, and insights into which retailers are checking out your brand and products. To learn more, visit rangeme.com/startupcpg.
We'll be right back.
Hey friends, inventory management can be a major pain. Keeping track of all your ingredients, your inventory across warehouses and co-mans, your retail and e-com orders, and tying all of that together. When your Excel spreadsheet breaks, check out our friends at Sin7 Core, our inventory management software partner. You can track everything you make and sell, and as the leading tool for early CPG brands, it integrates with all the major software like QuickBooks, Shopify, Amazon, and whatever your warehouse and co-mans are using. Through Startup CPG, you get a free month trial and then 50% off the 3 months after that. To get started, check out sin7.com/startupcpg. That's Sin, C-I-N, like the first 3 letters in Cincinnati, and the number 7. So sin7.com/startupcpg. Back to the show.
Generally, if you are changing your UPC code, the distributors and the retail accounts you have, particularly large ones, will often require you to free fill for any UPC change. That was probably the largest factor. That's, depending on your distribution, how many doors you're in, how many distributors you have, which distributors those are, that could be a small or a huge cost.
I think for more distributor brands like Fila Manila, I think the challenge is that when you change the net weight, it's almost a requirement to change your UPC. A lot of that requirement is driven mainly by the retailers and also from a distributor as well, because you whatever you change that would affect the consumer pricing is something you have to change.
Hi, everyone. This is Grace, the Startup CPG editor, and today we have an episode of CPG 101. I interviewed Jake Deleon of Fila Manila and Alex Sorenson of Blank Slate Kitchen, and we get into a nitty-gritty CPG topic. Do you really need to change your UPC code if you change your product's net weight? We get into all the details, so I hope you enjoy and let us know what you think. Hello and welcome back to the Startup CPG podcast. I am Grace, the Startup CPG editor, and I'm super excited to be joined today by Jake of Fila Manila and Alex of Blank Slate Kitchen. And we will be talking about the very exciting topic, UPC codes. You love them, you hate them, you need them. We're going to talk about it. And I have Jake. So Jake, if you could please introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are, and then we'll come to you, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Grace. It's always a pleasure to be on Startup CPG. I love the community. I love the support that we get and how we support each other as founders and entrepreneurs. My name is Jake Deleon. I'm the founder of Fila Manila. Fila Manila is a maker of Filipino position sauces, condiments, and spreads. We're distributed nationwide in stores like Target and Whole Foods. And we were recently just on Shark Tank, which is a recent Startup CPG interview.
Yes, so exciting. And yeah, sorry, it's Fila Manila. I said it wrong the first time, but I'll get it right now. And then Alex, can you introduce yourself and your brand?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be able to share my experience here. Startup CPG has been an awesome community that has helped me so much. So I'm always happy to give back and help with my experience if it's helpful for others. I'm Alex Sorenson. I'm the founder of Blank Slate Kitchen. We craft international sauces, including a Sichuan chili oil and a zug, which is a Yemeni herby hot sauce.
I love it. And I actually did get to try Alex's products in the shelfies and they are delicious.
Oh,
So very
awesome.
exciting.
Yeah.
So this podcast idea was born out of a question that somebody asked in our Slack channel. So I'm going to read their question out loud first. So they asked, if we increase our net weight, but the entire product stays the same name, pack design, dimensions, and formula, do we need new UPCs? So, Jake and Alex both recently, or maybe not so recently, went through this experience of deciding to change their pack size, but they went in different routes in terms of whether or not they wanted to change their UPC. So, Alex decided not to change his UPC code, and Jake decided to change his UPC code, and both had some interesting effects, we'll say. So, first and foremost, I'd love to just ask you, Alex, when you were deciding it was time to make this change, why did you decide, or what were the main factors in your decision not to change the UPC code?
I would say the largest one is the cost. Generally, if you are changing your UPC code, the distributors and the retail accounts you have, particularly large ones, will often require you to free fill for any UPC change. That was probably the largest factor. That's depending on your distribution, how many doors you're in, how many distributors you have, which distributors those are. That could be a small or a huge cost. For us, we checked with the major retailer we are with was Whole Foods, and they said it was okay to keep our UPC code the same. We were in one region, so that might be different if it was a national or multi-region. We also don't work with UNFI or KeHE. They probably would not be so flexible. But we work with a number of smaller local regional distributors, and they were all fine with keeping the UPC code the same, as well as any of our major retailers. So for us, it was mostly that cost consideration of having to free fill. And then along with that, generally would go buying back whatever remaining inventory of the old size there was.
Yeah.
So that was the major
absolutely.
factor for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Jake, I saw you nodding as Alex was speaking. So I was wondering for you, why did you decide to change your UPC code?
So thank you, Alex. Like I think Alex kind of like put a lot of helpful information in there, especially for growing brands who may not be fully distributed yet. I think for more distributed brands like Fila Manila, I think the challenge is that when you change the net weight, it's almost a requirement to change your UPC. A lot of that requirement is driven mainly by the retailers and also from a distributor as well, because you kind of whatever you change that would affect the consumer pricing or is something you have to change. I think Alex hit the nail right in the head, because as long as you get alignment from your retailer, if Whole Foods says like, yeah, that's fine, and you don't have to deal with our frenemies of UNFI or KeHE, then by all means do it. Now, in our case, it was a little bit tricky because at the time, we were distributed nationally. We're working with both UNFI and KeHE along with multiple retailers. And so, although I wish I could just kind of do a soft conversion with some of our SKUs and the pack size change, ultimately it was like we had no choice. It's something we could not sneak by because obviously everyone would be alerted right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone is there's often many things that are just entirely out of your control. And just so that everyone who's listening knows, the guidance from GS1, at least in terms of changing your UPC code, is that if your gross weight changes are under 20%, you can technically retain the same UPC. That said, like Jake said, if your distributors won't allow that, there's nothing you can do, and you will have to change the UPC. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what that process was like when you did have to make this change to both change the net weight, but then also obviously change the UPC code, Jake. So what was the sort of implications of the decision to change the net weight and the UPC code?
Yeah, and Grace, I just want to piggyback on top of what you said earlier, which I think is a really good point. Changes like this are quite significant, right? They could really impact the company, how you use your resources, the timing and the complexity involved. And so I think Alex is doing the correct step is that if you're going to make changes like this, do it when you're super early in your journey. Do it when you're in one region of Whole Foods. Do it when you're in just one DC distributor. The longer you wait and the more evolved you get, the more expensive it's going to get, the more complex it's going to get, and the more of a nightmare it's going to get. Now, for us at Fila Manila, we didn't take it too lightly because, of course, at that point, we were at a national distribution level. Now, what drove us to change UPCs was not only just the net weight change, but also the form factor change. So for background, we first started by putting all of our sauces in glass jars. And then we made the pivot about a year later to transition to pouches. And so our net weight dropped from 12 ounces to 8 ounces. So obviously you can't sneak that by. It's like it's a significant change. But also wait a minute, this used to be a glass jar, now it's a pouch. Like you have to change it. It's kind of like, okay, I get it. You have to change. So the result of that is, luckily we work with great operations partners, but you have to think forward in terms of planning because as Alex said, you're stuck with that product that's out in the market right now. You may stop producing the old product already, but then you have to deal with all the existing product in the old format or the old UPC that's in the market, right? And essentially, if it doesn't sell, you're on the hook for it. And so, what we thought about is that, hey, we'll look at our forecast. How much have you been selling the last few months? And then we'll plan ahead. So we'll stop selling the old format and only introduce the new SKUs at a certain time. Hopefully by then, all the old SKUs would have sold away. So the bad news is that, you will be stuck with a bill for any product in the market that's a remnant of the old UPCs. But the good news is that if you plan carefully ahead enough, you can minimize that loss or that risk with some careful planning and forecasting.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Imagine this. You get accepted into a new regional chain. Hooray! Now, the race to drive velocity begins, but awareness plays are so expensive. Demos, displays, coupon programs, the list goes on. But what if there was a way to connect with millennial women, some of the most important shoppers out there, to actually go into the store, buy your product, and then post about it to their trusted friends and neighbors? Well, now there is. Meet Hummingbirds, the new platform that connects your brands with real shoppers in a specific city. Hummingbirds lets you set up your campaign, match with the local birds who are interested, and then track the social impact of the campaign. It's such a cool concept to hear about a product from someone from my own community that I know and trust rather than some big-time influencer who might not even be relevant in certain zip codes. To learn more, check out hummingbirds.com/startupcpg, and you can even register for a chance to win a free custom-managed program. The winner will be chosen on June 28th. Terms and conditions apply. Please visit the website for details. Good luck. And now, back to the show.
So, Alex, coming to you then, what was the experience like for you then of not changing your UPC code? Because I know there were still some challenges that came with that, and some of those could just be the challenges that come with changing your net weight. But could you speak a little bit about what the implications were of not changing your UPC code?
Sure. So first, I guess I would like to also highlight that what we did was wrong. That we did do, it ended up being, I think, 25% change in net weight. So what we did was wrong according to GS1 guidelines. Of course, those are GS1, and that's not like any type of binding authority. You're not going to get in trouble with the FDA or whatever. So I view them more as guidelines. Some of the issues we ran into would probably be the same no matter what, whether you change your UPC or not. One of them was that our distributor kind of ran out the inventory before switching over. So even though they said it would be kind of a seamless changeover, it wasn't as seamless as one would hope. So there was a few weeks of watching our sales numbers kind of plummet as all of the stores ran out of stock and the distributor ran out of stock. That's probably going to be the same either way. And that's going to be up to your distributors and how well they handle that transition. The biggest, I think there's two big kind of things that came up for us. One, you cannot change the information you put in the GS1 database. It's always going to be locked into GS1's database what our original size was. I've heard from someone else, I was actually talking to my co-packer about this, and they have a product line, and they said that they never, I haven't verified this, but they said that they never entered any information in the GS1 database. They just got their UPC codes and then went ahead and used them, and they didn't put the information in. I'm not sure if that's correct. I haven't, verified that myself. But if you're just starting out and haven't put the information into GS1, maybe that's an option to consider not doing that. I'm sure that information gets populated back somehow eventually. So I don't know, what the answer is there. But that was one of the things, is that we will never be able to change that information. So what GS1 says for our UPC code will always be incorrect. So that was one of the big kind of things I discovered down the line that I wasn't aware of. The other kind of the biggest probably problem for us is Amazon. We sell on Amazon, and we had some third-party sellers that had a lot of inventory. And so that was by far the biggest issue for us, was managing that transition. One of our third-party sellers had what I thought it was a short kind of month or two of inventory, and it ended up lasting them probably 6 months. And so there was this period where we had two sizes, and I held off on listing our size, the new size, on Amazon for a long time. But ultimately, I had to end up making two variations of the product, which isn't great. It could be confusing for customers on Amazon. And that was actually kind of a very difficult transition. Amazon locks in your UPC code to one variation. So I talked to dozens of Amazon support people, and everyone said, no, it's impossible to change this UPC code from the old variation to the new variation. It took me 6 months until I finally got someone at Amazon who was able to do that. And they were screen sharing, and I saw it took them 10 seconds to actually make that change. It's a matter of getting to that person that's deep, deep, deep in Amazon that can do that. I think most of the people don't have that, that tool available to them. So it is possible, but it's difficult. That said, I've heard from some Amazon consultants that you can do all kinds of tricks with variations and move things around. So maybe there was an easy way. I didn't find an easy way, but that was a problem. We still have two variations listed on Amazon. I've tried deleting the old one, and one of the problems there is that sometimes retailers would try to list our products on Amazon, resell them, and they were, I think, all going against that UPC code. So they were listing under the wrong variation, under the wrong size. And it just took a lot of time and effort to stay on top of that and try to message with them and get them to pull those listings. They're under no obligation to. So most of them just told me to take a hike and that they were going to continue listing it, even if it was wrong. So that wasn't great for us in terms of a customer review perspective. If people are buying what they think is a large size and getting a smaller size. Fortunately, I don't think we've had any bad reviews. But the Amazon piece was the biggest kind of problem for us. And that would not be a problem if you are only selling yourself and you don't have any third-party sellers, maybe some other situations, but just, if you're considering this route of not changing the UPC code and you have other people selling on Amazon, that could be a problem.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to highlight, and definitely it's easy to forget all these little hidden challenges you might run into in these scenarios. One thing I did want to note is that I did talk to somebody from GS1, and they said that they recently updated, I don't know how recently, but they updated the GS1 data hub to allow changes to your product records without creating a new GTIN. So that might have changed since the last time you were trying to do that, Alex. I'm not an expert, but that is what she told me. And
Great,
she
I'll
said,
check
though,
into that.
yeah. But she also told me, it's definitely a debate among brand owners of whether or not it's worth it to manage product data in the GS1 data hub or just use your own offline spreadsheet. So I think everybody is different and everybody has their own approach. But I wanted to ask you, Jake, what was it like managing the changeover from your old product to your old version of your product to your new version? Because, I know, like Alex said, he had to kind of wait out his product being sold. What was it like for you to manage that changeover?
Yeah, I also forgot to add is we did a UPC change for one of our product lines, which were the cooking sauces, because that was a significant new weight change and format change. But we actually kept the UPC for one of our other product lines, which are our condiments. So our banana ketchup, for example, came in 12-ounce glass jars. We just shifted it to a squeezy bottle, 12 ounce as well, and we kept the UPC. And so we were kind of managing from both kind of approaches, right? What happens when you don't change UPC? What happens if you do change UPC? We ran into some of the same issues that Alex ran into as well with the item that kept its UPC. So it's really interesting. But for us, if you think about what was the work involved in changing UPCs, it's almost like what I hinted before, because like the big fear in our mind was like, oh goodness, like we have a lot of product in the market in stores and in DCs that are the old UPCs, and then if we don't sell them by X amount of time, we're just going to get either a deduction or we're going to get a bill from our retailers or our distribution partners. And so the key is like, how do you mitigate that risk by hopefully trying to deplete as much of that inventory in stores and DC as possible, right? So you plan ahead, you forecast about like what are the amount of products you sell on a monthly basis, and then just see, hopefully you can kind of hold off the introduction of the new SKUs until you're able to sell off most of the items in store. I mean, it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have 0 items. But, for us, it's like, we had no choice because we didn't have the resources just to bail out in all these stores and stuff with all the excess inventory. So, you have to be creative. So part of it's forecasting. If you have some certain stores that might require some like significant promo or discounting, that's usually a lot cheaper to do that than it is to wait until it doesn't sell at all. Then you're stuck with the full price bill. So, I mean, by all means, it was definitely not a pleasant experience. But if you think if for your business, if it's a necessity in terms of your growth, you have to do it, and it's just something you have to manage against.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you have to do those refills when you were introducing the new sizes?
In our case, no, I don't think we had any. If for the retailers that did, we were able to negotiate no free fills. It always depends upon you and your category manager. But yes, but that's really one thing to be mindful of is kind of the free fill implication.
Yeah, absolutely. But a good reminder too that these are conversations and that you can negotiate. And, especially if you've already built a relationship with, your retailer, your category manager, it's worth having a conversation.
Yeah, that's an
So
important point that like, we asked our retailer, we asked our distribution partners, and I probably should have kind of pushed back a little bit more and asked about, whether that they kind of gave us the default response like, oh, a new UPC code change will necessitate a free fill. And I left it at that. I probably, I should have kind of pushed back on that a little bit more and said, hey, is that negotiable? Can we get that waived? That's always, a conversation that's worth having.
yeah, absolutely. And so, sort of thinking about even the decision to, as you were saying, Jake, if this is a change you need for your growth, I'm curious to hear from both of you. And maybe let's start with you, Alex, about making this change does come with a lot of challenges, right? So, why did you feel like it was necessary? And how did you know, like, okay, we should do this now because it's, essential for our growth as a brand?
One more kind of note about some
Hmm.
of the problems with the transition. One thing that either way, it's whether you change or don't change the UPC code, is getting that information to the end, retailers, the store buyers, and making sure they're aware of it. Sometimes, we did what messaging we could directly as well as through our distributors. But at the end of the day, I'm sure there's still scattered stores out there in the world that were never aware of it, that maybe never changed shelf tags. And you need to do as much as you can there. But at the end of the day, you might not be able to get the right person at every store to know about that. One thing that a broker suggested, if you're doing this, probably either way, if you're doing the UPC code change or not, is perhaps including an insert, a letter in every case of that first production run or something, just so that when the person in the store is actually unpacking that case, they have a physical reminder that, hey, this is a different size, this is a UPC code change or not, but just to kind of give them that reminder at the very end that they need to change shelf tags and things like that. So that was just like another kind of key point of that transition. In terms of the decision, when I first launched our product, I really had no experience in CPG, so I was kind of learning as I went. And I was looking at things kind of very much through an end customer, like what's a shelf price that would work and what's the kind of maximum value I can provide for that. So in my case, we're talking about our Sichuan chili oil. We initially launched with an 8-ounce size. No one else, we were one of the first, along with one of the major chili crisp brands that we are kind of lumped in as the same category. So we were one of the first before it's kind of blown up, and there's dozens and dozens of chili crisps now that we're kind of lumped in with. So I didn't have really any other competitors on the shelf that I could look at and benchmark and say, what's the kind of normal size for this, and what's the standard. So we launched with an 8-ounce. Again, to kind of provide the maximum value to the customer for that shelf price. They'd get 8 ounces for the price that seemed to be a good shelf price. We're able to absorb all kinds of cost increases throughout the pandemic and all the supply chain issues. I kept the price stable for 4 years, and so we were basically the shrinkflation thing. We finally realized that we had to up the price, and that 8-ounce jar, it was going to be really expensive on the shelf. And by that point, there was a ton of other people in this space, in the chili crisp and chili oil space. And pretty much every other brand is a 6-ounce. So that was, when I started looking, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to increase the shelf price. But then we're going to be, much higher cost on the shelf than anyone else. Even though we're a larger size and it might be a better value, it's a lot harder to get initial customer trial if you're, $15 to $20 as opposed to $10 to $15. So that was really what was driving this decision, was being able to fold in a little bit of a price increase without outpricing ourselves on the shelf. So that's what we were going for, and then just being consistent in size with our category at that point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what about for you, Jake? What sort of made you decide to take the plunge and deal with the challenges that come with this change? Why did you feel like it was necessary for Fila Manila?
Yeah, I totally agree with Alex. And to echo, some of his inputs, it was exactly the same reasons why we decided to make the big change as well. So, during the time about 2 years ago, we saw a lot of macroeconomic things happening in the US. Inflation, consumers are freaking out about rising prices, and spending is kind of pulling back. And so, when we thought about our product line, we were seeing a disadvantage for us on shelf because we were a bit more premium priced, right? So we wanted to see if there's a way to bring our retail pricing lower, to remove that barrier for consumers to try our product, right? So Filipino cuisine, it's growing, it's fast, but it's not as huge as established cuisines like Indian or Chinese. So if you're making your product more premium price, it increases the barrier for someone to try it versus some of the other products. Number two, if you looked at what's happening in our world of startups and emerging brands, there's a real scrutiny, not just from investors, but also in terms of keeping your business alive, of being profitable, right? So we wanted a way to increase our gross margins because glass is crazy expensive. And I think, Alex, you packaging glass, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So glass is a pain in the, it rhymes with glass. I don't know if this is a podcast. And so, we're seeing the writing on the wall. It's like, hey, glass is expensive. It's heavy. It's even more expensive to freight. And, it makes it for a very difficult proposition to do e-commerce, because shipping glass from the East Coast to the West Coast is like, why even bother, right, with the transaction. And so we had so many factors that are driving us, is like, hey, we have to increase profitability and we have to make our prices lower for consumer. And for us, the best way to do that was, of course, offering a lower amount in the product, which allows us to reduce our cost to consumer, and also changing the format. So we don't have to deal with glass anymore. So we have a lot more flexibility when it comes to our improving our gross margins, and also, in addition, lowering the price for consumer as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's probably a point so many founders get to in their business, because I think almost every single CPG founder I've ever spoken to is like, I came to CPG with no experience. So people start out one way and then over time they're like, okay, I got to make some changes. So I think it's a very common experience. So sort of now that you've both come out the other side though, right? What is some advice you would give to a founder who is maybe in your shoes, a year, 2 years ago when you were making this decision to make the change? And then for you, Alex, I'll start with you to making the decision not to change the UPC. What's some advice you would give to a founder who's, trying to make these decisions?
I think the biggest is just to have conversations with everyone and see if you can get, again, for us, it was that cost of free fills. I kind of just hate the idea of free fills. It's like I don't get stuff for free that I can then sell at 100% profit. So I kind of love pushing back when stores ask for that. And there is, that's always negotiable. So that's kind of the most important thing, is to talk to everyone and see what makes sense with your distributors and with your retailers. That's the most important starting point is what they want and what they're willing to do. One of the other kind of factors for us was just that consistency of sales history, that it's the same product, it's just like a slightly different size. And so on Amazon or elsewhere, like it seemed beneficial to keep that track record of sales history for that UPC code. So those were kind of the most important thing is just talk to everyone, get input from your various partners. Ideally, we're small and bootstrapped, and so we don't have the operating capital that's maybe venture-backed brands and others have that can absorb some of these bigger costs of free fills and transitions and stuff like that. If I were to do it all over again, I would probably get more money to start out and be able to weather these changes perhaps the proper way. But also the proper way is it's more just advice, and you don't have to kind of go with whatever GS1 says you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Do what works for you and do what works for your partners, and just have conversations and make sure you're all on the same page. And what about you, Jake? What advice would you give to, a brand that maybe was in your shoes when you were making this decision?
Yeah, I would say that when you start off as a brand, you tend to think that the product you're releasing in market, it's your child, so it's perfect. But one thing that we learn as founders as we continue in our journey is that it's never perfect in the eyes of consumer. So you're constantly chasing, right? You're constantly tweaking the recipe, thinking about the packaging, maybe going up to even changing the format and changing the amount of product you offer in your item. So the best advice I get to say is that, if possible, start small and learn, start small as in maybe selling at a farmer's market and just kind of getting feedback from face to face from consumers before you enter your first Whole Foods test store or your first Whole Foods region, because that'll give you the flexibility and you're able to make changes without spending too much money or your time or resources, as opposed to starting off huge right off the bat. So I know it's kind of like detrimental to a lot of what founders think, because they think they have to start out big, go nationwide with this retailer. But if possible, just start out small, because you're going to change your product eventually, and learn from your mistakes early on and avoid some of the costly errors about if you start off kind of too big too soon and you need to make changes then.
Yeah, I think
I have one other thing I wanted to add. That was part of our decision. I think like the thinking around this is also taking into when I started and had no idea. I didn't know how important velocity was in terms of sales metrics for stores, and so that was another kind of part of this consideration. Downsizing is that I know with our product, our Sichuan chili oil, we have some kind of power users that tear through a bottle, but kind of the more average consumer, it takes them a little bit longer, and so kind of downsizing gets them to purchase more frequently and increases our velocity, which is a very important metric for your stores. And so that was another kind of consideration that's important that you maybe don't think about when you're starting out and don't know this world, that if you're just focused on providing a great product and a great value, you don't know that the velocity of your sales is actually important, and downsizing a little bit or starting out with a smaller size might be better for your overall performance at stores. So that was another kind of factor that went into this.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And again, just goes to show though of like, you start out with this like, rose colored glasses where you're like, I'm just going to offer this amazing product to my consumers. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, there's so many other things I have to worry about and so many other people I have to please and all of the above. So, but I appreciate you both so much sharing your expertise and, your experience. And, I really think the only way we learn is from hearing from each other and asking each other questions. So I know that a lot of our listeners will find this valuable. And before I let you both go, I would love to just hear, Jake, where can people learn more about Fila Manila and buy your product?
Yeah, please visit us at filamanila.com. We order through us on the website, or you could use your store locator to see what's your nearest store closest to you.
Awesome. What about you, Alex? Where can people buy Blank Slate Kitchen?
BlankSlateKitchen.com. We have our store finder there. We're in Whole Foods throughout the Northeast region, as well as scattered retailers all over the country. You can purchase us on our website, as well as Amazon, now that we finally have those size changes worked out.
Perfect timing. Well, thank you both so much again. And I'm really excited to see where both of your brands go in the future.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharf. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.